Gabriot coming at you with another Monster Train Expert Guide. As always, chapter markers are below, so if you got any particular part of this strategy you want to just check out, maybe skip the rest, feel free to do that. I don't think this one's going to be as long as normal. Not a whole lot to go over here, but if you find yourself skipping Emberdrain cards a lot, then this is the guide for you. Let's get into it here. So, why Emberdrain, right? Well, why pick these? Well, it's because these exist. That's literally pretty much it. And I guess this one too, Immortal Trade. But really it's these two on the side here. Void Binding and my man, Furnace Tap. Furnace Tap, everyone knows how good that one is. I don't think everyone knows how good Void Binding is. You know, they're good enough on their own. Yeah, maybe some people like to permafrost them, play them right before the boss. That's okay. How about you double stack it and play it whenever you want to? How about you double stack it and, let's say in the case of Furnace Tap, maybe even remove that consume, if you can make that work. That's 4 Ember, maybe you can't. It's possible. But that's a lot of multi-strike. It's a lot of damage shield. It's a lot of rage. And it's a lot of lifesteal. But if you're running Void Binding, it's usually a little bit redundant to be using Immortal Trade. I think that's kind of why I don't really think of it as highly as these two. This is a good one too. So let's get into this. How do we do this? A little bit of background on myself. When I was pretty new in the game, I would pretty much, especially these two right here, Void Binding and Immortal Trade, just pass them over all the time, not really giving them much thought. I was like, why would I Ember Drain myself, right? Pyro Wings suck. Pyro Wings are like so annoying. Why would I give myself more Ember Drain than those guys even give me just for some damage shield and rage and lifesteal, right? So I get it. I get why people might not like these. But imagine it didn't give you Ember Drain. Would you take them then? Would you spend 2 energy to get a multi-strike 1? Would you spend 1 energy to get damage shield 2, rage 6? Would you double stack it to 2 Ember to get 4 damage shield? The equivalent of playing 4 Ember on a prismatic shard or whatever that thing's called. And 12 rage, equivalent of more rage than a Ritual of Battle gets you? For less Ember? I think you would. So let's get into it here. First things first, we got the common enablers. These are common cards. And if you didn't know, common cards only are offered in rings 1 through 2. I think I point that out on the next slide, but let's just point that out now. So, these are the 2 cards you're really looking to get. Perils and Mind Collapse. More so Perils. Perils is the primo card to enable an Ember Drain build. It's, it's just one of the best cards in the game. And if you see it, you should probably snag at least one just to have the option of going Ember Drain should you find the cards later on. Now, the nuts, if you're not sure what that means, that's like, if you're playing poker, you're playing cards, you get a nut draw. That's like the best draw you can get, right? Well, the nuts here is going to be Perils of Protection on Holdover. That means every single turn, no matter how Ember Drained you are, not uncommon for me to have 50 or more Ember Drain on a unit. It doesn't matter, you just play it and you get 3 Ember. And some Rage. It'd be worth it without the Rage, but hey, I'll take 3 Rage. That's 6 damage every turn. And to a lesser extent, if you don't find the Holdover, that's fine. You can still just have a Perils and Permafrost. You probably want to Hellvent it at that point. You probably want to have good card draw, probably take some card draw upgrades, and you probably want your deck to be a little bit thin. That way you can usually have it when you need it. It's also worth noting you don't always have to play Perils. You're only doing this to play, cards that actually have Ember cost. We'll get into all that later though. Mind Collapse, another one. Takes a little bit more to get going. The payoff's not quite as great, but it's still a viable option. The thing with Mind Collapse is you do need to add 10 magic power on it. You'll have a 50% chance at any shop or reroll at a magic shop to get that. You don't want the Surge Stone because you want that on Holdover, right? You could also put this on Permafrost, but for the sake of saying workable, I'd say these are kind of equivalent: a Permafrosted Perils or a Holdover Mind Collapse with plus 10 magic power. And if you weren't aware of the mechanic, these X cost cards, you play them at 0, you still just get the 10. If you have that flat 10 magic power boost, it'll still do 10 damage. So usually there's an enemy unit available to kill, and then you'll just get that 2 Ember and be able to use it. And you get the nice bonus of killing a backliner. But remember, you got to kill them. So if this is your game plan, you might want to not take armor trials, just saying. And quick note here, there's a lot of additional ways to actually enable an Emberdrain deck beyond these 2 cards, but these are the 2 most important ones to get familiar with. I would say a good 19 out of 20 times when I'm doing an Emberdrain build is either of these cards that is the enabler. It's only that like 1 out of 20 time where all my other options come into play. So you really, we'll have some fun stuff at the end here when we go over all those, but really this is like the bread and butter: Perils and Mind Collapse. Now, I kind of touched on this a little bit, but you kind of have a chicken egg scenario here. As I said, I don't know if everybody realizes this, only in your opening cards and the ring 1 and 2 rewards do you actually get offered common tier cards, which means see that little white dot here in these cards versus like the blue dot and the purple dot here. That means these are common tier cards. Over here, blue is going to be an uncommon and purple is going to be a rare. So those are really the 3 tiers of rarity of cards. Past ring 3, you only get uncommon and rares. And in rings 1, 2, you can find uncommons and I think sometimes rares, but really some uncommons here and there. Most of the time though, honestly, you get in this chicken egg scenario where you really have to take Perils and Mind Collapse before you actually know if you're going to end up with Void Binding and Furnace Tap. So you kind of have to take a little bit of a leap of faith. But the great thing about these cards is even if you don't end up with these, great Emberdrain cards over here, they're not bad cards in their own right, and I'll get to that in this slide here. So yeah, like I said, they're both fine on their own. Perils is a very versatile card. You can, usually if you're playing Umbra, you have some morsels, and maybe you're going to feed your dude with them, right? Well, you just stick Perils for 0 Ember. You just can stick it on one of those morsels, and it'll make them now attack for 6. Or if they're already attacking, it'll give them 6 more attack. Even more if you got some rage artifacts, but for all intents and purposes, we'll say 6 attack. And then you get 3 Ember. That's pretty crazy, right? And even if you don't want to put on a morsel, you could always put it on like a chump block or 2. You probably won't get the rage if they're dying, but you'll still get that nice extra Ember to play out some expensive cards and whatnot. And then Mind Collapse, it's just kind of your standard targeted backline clear. That's pretty useful, taking out Scourge Shufflers or taking out some high damage units. There's a lot of high damage backliners, especially if it's like a plus damage trial where they have extra 4 or whatever damage in those early rings. That can be pretty brutal sometimes, and being able to not only kill them but also gain back 2 Ember after you do that allows you to play out a hand that otherwise just wouldn't be able to get played. So they're good, they're just pretty fine cards in their own right, so don't be afraid to pick them. You gotta, I would only not pick them if A, I already had like a Perils and a Mind Collapse, or B, I just had a really, really good reason to take the other cards. I would never just like straight up skip a Perils or a Mind Collapse if I didn't have one yet. But yeah, you're gonna be snagging them usually before any sort of Emberdrain cards are in your deck. except for this one. This is Immortal Trade. This is kind of the odd man out of the Emberdrain package. Not to diss the card, because it's actually a very good card, but it kind of does one thing. You know, it just helps with boss killing, and sometimes it'll help your unit survive. Sometimes that's needed on a wave. I don't find it's really needed for that as much as just simply stacking some lifesteal though for the boss. Or a heal. You know, it's a heal. It's stacking for a boss. That's what it does. It doesn't add you any actual damage as a thing. Whereas, you know, even a Perils is adding you a bit of damage, but especially a Void Binding and a Furnace Tapper just really helping you deal with those waves. Anyway, though, I pretty much will snag Immortal Trade if I find it anyway. I'd probably prioritize one of those enablers over it unless I thought I really needed some boss killing cards. Nice thing, though, is once you get the Immortal Trade and then you can, let's say you have a Perils as well, now you can really be confident that finding like a holdover on your Perils is a pretty good move. Even if you don't end up with Void Binding and Furnace Tap, at least you can play your Immortal Trade basically at will, and you could even like double stack it, get 8 lifesteal each time you play it. That's not a bad deal at all. Another nice thing about Immortal Trade is even if you don't have your enablers yet, you can just play it for 0 Ember, get that lifesteal. That'll have your unit ready to kill most of those early ring bosses, and you can play it, you know, early basically without permafrosting it or trying to get it ideally kind of right before the boss, and it's still a fine play because 2 Emberdrain is not unrecoverable. Like the Void Binding and Furnace Tap, those Emberdrain you for 3 and 4. That's a little bit harder to deal with typically, I'd say. Immortal Trade, you can still play at least 1 card the next turn, even more if you happen to get your rubber morsel on. But that's Immortal Trade. Perils on Holdover, we kind of touched on this. If you get that early holdover at a shop and you have Perils, I would try to snag it. You're going to be thankful later on if you do end up with an Emberdrain build that you had it. And even if you don't, I'm never too sad that I have a Perils on Holdover. Like I said before, it's a versatile card. You don't have to play it on a banner unit, you know, or an otherwise kind of permanent unit. You can basically just have it on Holdover, and you're getting that extra Ember if you play it on a morsel or other like temporal type unit. And you've basically just, you know, at the sacrifice of 1 draw, you've now made your Ember be 6 a turn, and that enables a whole plethora of other type of builds that we won't really go over in this guide. But there's also the Ember Gain builds, so it totally enables an Ember Gain build, which I don't run really nearly as much as an Ember Drain build, but I probably will do one on Ember Gain at some point here, because those can be very powerful, very fun to play too. I mean, both these are very fun to play. And honestly, the rage, you can't even really ignore that. Like it's not a whole lot of rage at once, but over the course of a fight, if you played it every turn on a unit, especially if that unit has any multi-strike, Animus of Will for even more, right? She gets 3 multi-strike base. With her, that's, you know, you're talking Rage 3 is 6 damage. 6 times 3, that's 18. 18 damage a turn. That'll definitely be more than enough offensive scaling in the early to mid game to get you through that. And even late game, it's still okay to have, even if you didn't hit on that those Emberdrain cards. You're still getting some scaling each turn. You'll probably need additional scaling, but you're glad to have it. And it also, you know, it's a good counter to Pyre Wings and whatnot. If you have this every turn, you don't really care if they're Emberdraining you. So, very versatile card. I say stick it on Holdover unless you have a really, really good Holdover target. Other than that, definitely wouldn't skip the Holdover upgrade if you see it. It's just too valuable on this card. And, you know, Mind Collapse, probably to a lesser extent. I would probably need to really know that I'm trying to bank on Emberdrain if I'm going to do that. But anyway, you know, let's talk about the big hitters here. I typically would say double stack is my priority upgrade on these bad boys. I'd give it first to Furnace Tap, then Void Binding next, if I happen to have both. But yeah, Furnace Tap especially, I mean, you're getting 2 multi-strike for 3 Ember. And you could even, obviously for 25 gold, bring it back to 2 Ember. That's ridiculous. Now, but, remember, the double stack does also hit the Emberdrain, hence why we really want those enablers. A good Emberdrain deck really loves to just swim in Emberdrain, just embrace the Emberdrain. You don't care about 50 Emberdrain on your unit when they're multi-striking for like 6 and have 20 damage shield and 500 damage on top of all that. But yeah, multi-strike there, and also Void Binding. Can't really ignore how good double stack is on Void Binding. That's 4 damage shield. You're not going to find anything in the game that really gives you 4 damage shield for that Ember amount and 1 card. And on top of that, it's just great rage scaling. That's a lot of damage, 24 damage with the double stack. That's assuming no deranged brute or rage artifacts to help you as well. And if they already got some multi-strike, that's going to help there. It's also really versatile. It's defensive and offensive, so you can slap it on a frontliner, even if they're not multi-striking. It will preserve their health. And sometimes you do want some damage on a frontliner to be able to take care of like some double tank type waves. Sometimes your backliner just, maybe they don't have multi-strike or something like that. Or maybe they just can't scale fast enough, and you just need that defensive scaling. But since you get that naturally offensive scaling on top of that, it just helps take care of those waves. Beyond that, I would say Eternal Stone is not bad on Furnace Tap. It's slower. I prefer double stack just so I can get it all out there at once. Fast scaling is the name of the game. There's not many waves in each fight. Really only the Seraph fight and the Arcus fight really last any amount of time. But in those fights, you're still glad to have it the consume element removed, because then you can just replay it at will. Sometimes if you have 2 Perils or just other enablers, you can just double stack and remove the consume. It'll be at 4 Ember then. Artifacts and just other cards can still enable you to do that. Be careful though. Typically I'm just having 3 Ember available on any turn, so it's rare that I do the both of them together. And then Void Binding, I actually, if I can't hit double stack and I don't have any better holdover targets, Void Binding is an A-OK holdover target. You can even, if you double stack it, you could still hold it over. It's only 2 Ember a turn, and getting that much damage, shield, and rage a turn is pretty legit. Especially, I really love Void Binding on sweepers. And Primordium, Superfood Primordium in particular. Just really nice scaling. You get to basically apply that to however many enemies there are there. You could add on Trample for extra hilarity. Yeah, just really good solid units. And sometimes with Void Binding, that's a nice one, because even if you don't have like your enablers on a holdover or otherwise like highly available yet, Void Binding you can still play on a chump blocker. You can kind of calculate it out so that they still die that turn, but they prevent all damage on your actual frontliner. Then that way you don't deal with the Emberdrain, but you still just prevent all the damage. That's pretty nice. And yeah, so let's say you missed out on your Perils and your Mind Collapse, but now you found these, right? We talked earlier, there's still a bunch of other options, right? I still would usually take these if I see them, unless I just have a really good reason not to, because they're just so valuable. And there are plenty of options past the first 2 rings to deal with Emberdrain, so let's go ahead and get right into them. Oh, and I meant to actually put this before the last slide, so let's pretend that was the case. Anyway, what are some good targets for these things? Well, definitely these champs come to mind. particularly the Reaper path. Also the Wrathful path is good with Furnace Tap. Not so good at Void Binding though, because you do want usually to get that revenge trigger. But Reaper's going to be good with all of these. He gladly welcomes the Void Binding if there's any spikes or sweepers, and he definitely likes the Furnace Tap, especially if you happen to go all the way in on Reaper. I usually do that if I know I have a Furnace Tap, or even the Hellhorned Tome, because you get so much slay, and that multi-strike just makes him an absolute damage dealing beast. And then both Monstrous and Glutton really like all three of these, I would say. Reaper doesn't care about Immortal Trade, but Monstrous and Glutton, they usually need some defensive support. So they really like Void Binding and Immortal Trade. Everything in the game is going to like Furnace Tap, really, other than like a Frost Shark or something. So they obviously like Furnace Tap as well, but really Void Binding and Immortal Trade are really nice on Monstrous and Glutton. You get that extra damage on Monstrous and it just keeps on trampling, and then you love to have that damage shield, since there's really, with the pip space he takes up, it's pretty hard to like fit other chump blockers or just other things on that floor. And combining them is great too. You can block some damage, and maybe just heal back any that you didn't block. And then Glutton, same type of deal. He's really great at scaling offense, not so great at scaling defense. By the third rank, his defense is a bit better, but even then, you're pretty happy to get like a Void Binding and an Immortal Trade. He's much different than, say, like a Crucible Collector or Warden, where their Gorge is basically preparing them for a boss. Glutton's great at dealing with waves, but without the support of something like Void Binding and Immortal Trade, he often can struggle with actually killing a boss because he just doesn't have the health or sustain to get it done. And then Superfoot Primordium is probably my favorite target of all for Emberdrain. You just, especially if you can, in this screenshot it's 3 Superfood, but the ideal for me is just 1 into Superfood and 2 into Stalwart. Oh man, at that point, you can stack a double stacked Furnace Tap. If you get that in early, that is 2 multi-strike that gets transferred to your frontliner every single turn. 8 buffet worth of that. Typically maybe you're looking at 5, but even then that's 10 multi-strike you just stacked. And then all the Void Bindings on top of that, you can get like all that damage shield. If your frontliner's quick, you're not losing any of that damage shield, so there's no way the boss is ever going to take you out. It's pretty much a free win with Superfood. Honestly, even if I don't have any of the enablers, I'll just go all in on this on Superfood and just hope I don't end up fighting Scourge Shufflers. And then, any banner unit that is basically your carry is going to love to have these. What Emerald Trade you're going to put on your frontliner, or whoever's basically there to take on a boss. Like, say you're fighting a sweeper boss, and you have a low health unit. Well, they just became a high health unit essentially with lifesteal. You just basically quadrupled their health for that fight. Same with Void Binding, as long as they're not like a multi-striker, you basically take whatever their damage is and you just added that with the damage shields. And then obviously any damage dealer is going to love to have Furnace Tap. Alright, on to the lesser known, or I guess non-conventional methods here for dealing with Emberdrain builds. Hellhorned Edition. So, these arrows didn't show up as big as I thought they would, but there are arrows here. Let me explain them. So important work. I've done this one a few times. It works particularly well if you have either this Shard Tail, I believe it's in the Imp Parade path, where it minuses 1 on your imps and gives you an imp every turn. You're guaranteed to be able to play a free imp every turn. And then if you have this important work on Holdover, you're getting to not only draw back the card, or draw another card, but then you get the 2 embers, so that's pretty damn nice. Forever Flame essentially does the same thing. It won't give you an imp every turn. However, you could just put a imp on Endless and then you're probably good. Hopefully it's like a super useful imp like Welder Helper or Transcend Imp, but any imp will do. Um, and in that same vein, you could just get Hell's Banners or Queen's Tail. And if you got Imps, you can just play them for free. And if you got 2 a turn with Hell's Banners, you're going to just get 2 natural, or 3, you're going to get 3 Ember. With Queens, you're going to just get 1 and draw 1. But at least you only got to play 1 to do it. That's still pretty nice. And, beyond all that, you could do Pyre Chomper. You still want to get either, basically make him cost 0. But you put that sucker on Endless, and, as long as he's dying every turn, put him in the front or something, or put him in the back. Maybe you got the Imp Parade plus Imperialist build, which is pretty common. In that case, he'll just naturally become a bomb, an AoE bomb, and get cleared out on its own with Shard Tail. In that case, you're getting 4 Ember a turn. That's pretty nice. I've done that one before too. And I put a little X here on Unbroken Horn. It's not 100% out of the question that you could make Unbroken Horn work, but trust me on this one. If you're doing a proper Emberdrain build, like I said, with like double stacked Furnace Tap or Void Bindings, and you're playing a lot of them, you'll be pretty damn hard pressed to conserve enough Ember to actually make Unbroken Horn be a viable enabler. I mean, even I have gotten up to 20 some Ember conserved with this, and it didn't take a turn or 2. I've tried to make it work a few times. I think in theory you could make it work, but I don't want to lead people down a path thinking this is like a viable, consistent way to make it work, because it certainly isn't. It could help with like a light Emberdrain build, but we're not really talking about that. We're playing to win here, and we're talking about the real Emberdrain builds that swim in that Emberdrain and really take advantage of a crap load of rage, damage, shield, life steal, multi-strike, either or, and all of the above. So yeah, no Unbroken Horn. And these are the ones that really I can vouch for. There's always other things like, once you start getting like the triple spell upgrade artifact, there's always going to be shenanigans there you can do, but we're not really going to get into too many of that type of things. I want to be a little bit realistic with the options here. So that's the Hellhorned Options. Now we got the Awoken Options, and actually I've ran the Engraft one pretty often. It's not very sexy, I'll admit that, but it's especially good if you have either of the Hollows or the Sentient Rejuve edition. In that case, you're getting the nice restore trigger on those units, while also basically the gold standard here that you want to do is put on Holdover like you would Perils or whatnot, but you also want to reduce the Ember so it's free to play. At that point, you're not losing out on any draw, since it's draw 1 the next turn each time. You don't gain the Ember that you would get from, obviously, a Perils or even a Mind Collapse. However, you can still play a card which, try to build your deck accordingly, and it's actually pretty good. It's not as good, obviously, as Mind Collapse or Perils, but it's serviceable. And I think that my favorite part about it is it's just easy to pull off. Like, some of these other ones just aren't as easy to pull off. Awoken Rail Spike, for example, just a very good card in general. I hear it's getting nerfed, so maybe by the time some of you see this, this is no longer a viable option. I can't say for sure, but I can say in the current state, it's workable. It's a weird one, so you have to have a lot of moving pieces for this one to work, but I have done it before. So the first thing you're going to absolutely need here is the first Hell Pact, which gives you that +3 to the X value when played. So, take your standard Awoken Rail Spike with this. At 0, you're getting 3 cards drawn if you played it for 0 Ember. Now, since you want it to be consistent, you're probably going to want to remove the consuming aspect of this, which will give you 1 less card drawn per turn. However, that's not too much of an issue. It's to me, it's worth it to then try to get Holdover on it. At that point, you just keep drawing through your deck very fast, actually, and everything starts permanently becoming a 0 cost essentially. And at that point, it's pretty ridiculous, but a lot of moving parts there. You got to get that relic or artifact. You got to get Eternal Stone first and then keep Stone. This is bordering on like being almost unrealistic, but I put it in because I've actually pulled this off twice that I can remember, and that seemed like worth including. And I will say, theoretically, and if you don't get first Hell Pack, there is still probably another. What am I trying to say? There's still. Never mind. There's not another way. I was gonna say you could get the three slot whatever you call it, but that actually won't work. So yeah, just ignore what I said right there at the end there. But Wilting Sapwood is another one. Not a unit that I love, but sometimes I'm just stuck with him. And having him, you can technically make an Emberdrain build work if you didn't get the Emberdrain enablers that you want. Awoken always has Vine Grasp at the very least, which is, and basically, this little note here, you want self-damage and 0 cost spells. So they got to be able to be played for 0, and you got to be able to target yourself and damage yourself, ideally for not a whole lot of damage. So unupgraded Vine Grasp on Holdover could be great for that. That's a versatile card in general, but that will give you an Ember each turn. Other options could be even like an Entumbra Assault. If you Ember reduced it to 0, you can shoot your own dude. You won't get any morsels for it, but if you need that Ember, it's there. You kind of have to gauge do you need the Ember or not. And these are kind of options there. Oh, I will admit though, Awoken, not the sexiest of options and not the most powerful ones. I would say Engraft is the best option here. I pull that one off actually pretty often. Stygian has some interesting ones. The idea with this would be a Kinstone Totem basically synergizes with these discard cards. These two you'd have to Ember reduce, so I put an extra step in here because they have that natural 1 cost. But it's easy enough to just Emberstone them. And then if you slap them on Holdover, I don't know if I would ever go so far as to slap a Foregone Power on Holdover, but hey, you could, right? If you didn't have anything else, why not? These are all viable. Another nice thing about Kinstone is, you can keep gaining the Ember, right? If you have multiples of these. Offering Token on Holdover is a surprisingly good play in any incant deck. It's totally fine to do that. I've had that be an enabler before, so it was like I was getting a bunch of incant synergy while also being able to go Emberdrain and play my double stacked Furnace Taps. That was a pretty fun deck. But any of these with Kinstone is going to work. And then the other real somewhat realistic option I would say is to get Titan's Claws and any of these freezing cards. You could put Preserve on a Holdover if you really wanted to. I've done that before. That way, you are delayed a turn of being able to play them. However, you can get some real good turns set up with that. Often with Stygian, you're kind of setting up on a floor and just waiting for a big turn to happen. With the Ancient Synergy and whatnot, or even just like a Crypt Builder or Titan's Tooth, even an Ice Storm or something. And in those cases, either any of these, you'll just start freezing your hand, and eventually you'll just have a hand of 0 cost that you can play at will when you want to. Those are the Stygian options, really. Nothing really happening beyond that. Then there's additional Umbra options. If you don't get those Perils and Mind Collapse, there's still options within the class. Kindle, I put this similar to Awoken Rail Spike because it is really the same setup that you need. However, I would say I almost, in a way, like it more than Rail Spike because it just lets me play the stuff that's already in my hand instead of having to draw new stuff and only play that stuff. You are going to need that Hell Pact, remove, consume, and Holdover though, so a lot to ask for. But if you do that, you're getting a decent amount of Ember each turn. You're getting 4 Ember each turn. which is even more than Perils, which is pretty nice. That allows you to do those kind of shenanigans with double stacked furnace tap that's also consume removed, stuff like that. Ember Cache, this one is not necessarily going to be super consistent in terms of your draw. And what I mean by that is, you're going to have to cycle through. If you do the Ember Cache route, you kind of want to keep your deck thin, and you probably want to go double draw upgrade. And if your secondary clan has any draw available, usually that would be Awoken if it was anything, but even something like Stygian or like even like Umbra, they have or sorry, what am I saying? Stygian has the I can't remember the name of it. You throw all your hand away, you discard your hand and you draw 5 more, whatever that card is. You know what I'm talking about. Dark something. Yeah. Anyway, but anyway, you want a thin deck and you want a lot of card draw. In that case, you can remove the consume on this Ember Cache and take an Emberstone on it. You can't really put it on a holdover at that point. You could if you had the triple artifact, but it's not really necessary if you made the proper like thin deck. Once you draw through your deck and you played this that first time, at that point, it's also a nice Hellhunt target. If you have 2 of these, it makes it a lot easier. But especially if you have 2 of these, then you just start blasting through your deck, gaining Ember every time you get those excavated Embers. And then the next time you play these, since you remove the consume, it'll just keep cycling that much faster, and you just start lightning through your deck. So if you can survive getting through your initial draw without losing all your pyre health or your unit's health, Ember Cache is actually a pretty good option. And then here, there was a little bit too much to list here, but the idea here is if you have Hell's Banners, there's a lot of ways to generate Umbras. There's a lot of ways to generate morsels for Umbra. And you just, whatever you can do for 0 Ember at that point, if you can do it consistently, Hell's Banners is going to be a Perils worth of Ember each turn. This is actually pretty viable too, especially if you have like these artifacts in particular. Abandon and Umbra, Shade Lamp. If you have any way to 0 cost kill a unit, that Shade Lamp alone will enable that. If you have Hell's Banners as well. And Umbra, this one you'll get 1 morsel, but if you have any other way to get one, even just like a 0 cost Shade Splitter on Holdover would work at that point. That wouldn't be out of the question. I've done it before. It works. But even other things, like you could put say you have like some magic damage, you could 0 cost an Umbra Assault, put that on Holdover. That'll do the trick. You could do some bottled morsels shenanigans. Probably not looking at Holdover there, but you can ration your morsels, so to speak, so that you only play 2 each turn, or even 2 only when you need them. Then they start cycling back through your deck, and you can essentially have them almost every turn that you need them. That also is especially easier if you have Abandon and Umbra. But yeah, basically any way you can get 2 morsels for 0 Ember is going to get you there. And then last but not least, certainly the most complicated and viable of the secondary clans is the Melting Remnant. A lot of fun things you can do here. I couldn't even list them all, honestly, but let's just go over them real quick. A lot of them are shared between another. So Molded, 0 costed, and Holdover opens up a lot of options. We've talked about Hell's Banner with a few of the other clans. Same idea here. If you have Molded on Holdover and you Hellvent it, that's good enough. Or if you just have 1 on Holdover and you just have other like drags around, or even just other non-held over moldeds at 0 cost you can play. You can usually get Hell's Banners to go off, or some 0 cost units other than drags, such as Remnant Hosts. There's a lot of options there. As long as you can play 2 at 0 each turn, you're good. Remember that whenever you reform a unit, it comes in at 0 cost, so totally fine for these Emberdrain builds. Another pretty common thing is the Flicker's Liquor. Play that. I always love to get two of these moldeds. If I can manage early holdover in a molded, it's pretty good holdover or Hellvent target. And definitely, one is already working with Flicker Slicker, but if you can get two, then you're really looking pretty fine. Usually you can chain together everything such that you just play your entire hand out with Flicker Slicker, and you don't care that you're Ember drained. And then Remnant Host, I would put any tomb unit here if I also had the forever, what is it called, forever flame, basically the thing that reduces the cost of the tomb units initially. But Remnant Host naturally costs 0, which is why he kind of gets the spotlight here. So there's a lot of things you can do with Remnant Host. You could just simply put Endless on him, either via a upgrade at a merchant or a Endless Tome. That works to basically do the Flickers Lickers shenanigans, and then also you could just let him die and make him something you hold over. At that point, there's the additional thing here of Encased Ember. This one's super nice. You just have to have a way to have kind of similar to the Wilting Sapwood. You need a self-damage geocost spells, so maybe like into Umbra Assault, for example, would work. But anything that targets your own units for 0 cost, at that point, if you can kill them on your turn, I prefer Endless on the Remnant Host, honestly, just because Molded will get their health up over time, and 0 cost spells might not have enough damage to keep doing it. So really, Endless is mainly what you're looking for here, if you're going the Encased Ember route. But you get Endless on that, it'll only have 1 health each time, so any amount of 0 cost damage you can do, blast them with it. Then you get that 5 Ember on that turn. Pretty ridiculously nice. And then there's also this nice and fun method, which is actually pretty low investment if you think about it. Wickless Recruitment or Resin Removal removes your debuffs. Resin Removal will need an additional upgrade of Ember to bring it down to 0, but that's not too big of a deal. The nice thing about these is with a lot of these others, we had kind of said Holdover. And I will mention, if you can't find Holdover on any of these, Permafrost is always the next best thing. A thin deck, good draw, and Permafrost often can match the power of Holdover. But I thought these two were particularly extra worthy of Permafrost, because really you don't need Holdover with these necessarily. It really depends on how often you're playing your Void Bindings and Furnace Taps, but if you're doing my ideal, which is just, a few double stacks, when you see them, you just play them, Permafrost is going to be actually almost better for you than Holdover, because then you don't have to redraw it. You just basically, you play that Furnace Tap or the Void Bindings, or both on whatever turn, and hopefully with the Permafrost, it allows you to get them that, hold on to them for that same turn. So you play them, you get all that Ember Drain, you play these, and it just removes the Ember Drain. That way every turn after, you just not Ember Drain, but you have all the benefits that you had. Now, obviously you're going to have to gauge it, like Holdover, if you think you need to do that a lot. And, sometimes, like, Seraph the Patient, for example, you might just want Holdover in general here to get rid of that melee weakness every turn. Even, like, Sap Seraph could be worth Holdover here, too. It kind of gets that double whammy of the effect. But that's pretty much my main suggestions with Melting Remnant. Actually pretty viable to enable Ember Drain. Though you may not want to go Ember Drain sometimes if reforming and not keeping our units in play is part of your strategy. Though I've found ever since Exiled came out, that's less of a prime strategy. Usually I find just keeping units in play, either without burnout or with burnout, is preferable, just because there's so many good rage options, and you lose that if you're constantly reforming them. But anyway, that's all that, and then we just got a few miscellaneous notes here for more ways to get out of Ember Drain. This one is pretty ridiculous, but I thought it was worth calling out. So you know how you can get that cavern event where you take the calcified embers, 3 of them I believe it is, and you hold on to them forever, and then they turn into excavated embers. Well, once they turn into that, if you do, you're going to have a lot of moving pieces here, but if you get Eternal Stone on it, bring it back down to 0, and if you have Lightstone casing, you can put it on Holdover. At that point, it's pretty ridiculous. If you can pull all of that out, and I've done it before, Hellvent it, you can basically set up an infinite. You'll draw through, and if your deck's thin enough, like you're basically drawing through this crap. You know, a lot of your deck with a ton of energy. If you have like additional draw on top of that, which I happen to have in that particular deck that I'm thinking of, you're gonna be sitting pretty. But this is obviously a lot to ask for. I will say, if you don't find the Lightstone casing, you could still just Emberstone it, Eternal Stone it. That's fine. You won't have the consistency of being able to play your cards every turn. However, they're still fine to have these keep shuffling back into your deck, since you remove that consume, and as long as you can play it for 0, you're getting another card, you're getting Ember. It's a pretty good deal whenever they come up. A fine Hellvent target. I kind of just, you go Conduit, you don't have to go 3, but you could go 1 or 2 maybe. And then most of your, all your damage spells pretty much be free at that point. Or just simply a lot of Emberstone upgrades. I kind of made this note. It seems dumb, but actually, like, I would say, out of everything I listed, Perils is obviously number 1. Mind Collapse is number 2, or Mind Schlatt. What is it called? Mind Collapse? Yeah. I wanted to say like Mind Shaft for some reason, but I would say Engraft is actually number 4 on my list for just in terms of consistency. The third is just this thing over here, which is basically, I didn't find any Emberdrain enablers, but I found Furnace Tap, I found Void Bindings. I still want to double stack them because it's so powerful to do so. Well, a great way around that, just take all the spells you actually care about and make them cost 0. It sounds dumb, but trust me on this, it works. I think I did it on one of my recent videos. Can't remember. I think it was like a Primordium one. Oh, what is that? Okay, sorry about that. So where was I? Yeah, just get the Ember down to 0. I don't know, lost my train of thought. Well, you get the picture. And then final closing notes. Against Seraph the Diligent, you're probably going to want to Hellvent your enabler. Kind of looking at you, Perils of Production. Very nice to Hellvent that, maybe even twice. If so much of your ability to play cards revolves around that Perils, you don't want to get stuck in a situation where you have to burn that to play your cards, or even if you don't burn it, you have to like let it go through your deck and then cycle all the way back through it again. Especially now that you probably have a lot of like Scourges being shuffled into your deck at that point. That's not a good situation. That can often spell defeat. Definitely Diligent, you want to be diligent against and make sure you have backup plans. If you don't Hellvent your enabler, at least try to have a bunch of 0 cost spell fodder that you can reliably draw on the same turns. Even something like maybe you don't remove a Plink and you just bring it down to 0 Ember or something like that. Just for this pure purpose of having it as something you can burn instead of Perils, yet still play Perils on that turn. If you know you're going Emberdrain, even if you don't know, but you have like a Perils on Holdover, it's not really worth it to take an Ember upgrade at that point. Say if you beat Daedalus or Talos, or even if it's like later and you beat Arcus and Fel, I would definitely not take the Ember upgrade, considering it just kind of defeats the purpose of being able to play a Perils every turn, right? especially if you plan on actually sticking the rage on a unit to stick around, because then you're going to have that Emberdrain sticking around. I mean, use your judgment. Maybe it makes sense to do it on some other decks where you're pretty confident you're not going Emberdrain. But I don't know. If I have a Perils and a Holdover, I pretty much never take an Ember upgrade. I'm pretty much committing at this point, and I'd rather, usually it's a draw upgrade unless I had a really good reason to take Pip. And yeah, that's pretty much gonna be it. Hopefully that's useful. If you got any questions about it, go ahead and ask me. I typically do Emberdrain almost every time I can handle it on Umbra. That's like my #1 game plan to go towards, even more so than like morsels. I'll pretty much ignore morsels in favor of Emberdrain if I know I can pull it off. It's super strong. It's usually going to result in a win at all confident levels. So yeah, hopefully that was useful, and sorry for the distractions. Thank you for watching. Peace.